April 1994, Morocco's Sahara Desert. A place where beauty and death walk hand in hand. Here, in one of the harshest environments on Earth, men and women gather every year to take on the ultimate test of endurance, the Marathon des Sables, a 156-mile ultramarathon through blistering heat, over towering dunes, across barren plains where even the wind carries the taste of dust. One man came here chasing glory, testing the limits of his strength, his courage, his will to endure. What he found instead was 9 days of hell, a fight against thirst, hunger, madness, and death itself. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may be disturbing to sensitive viewers. Mauro Prosperi was born in 1955 in Rome, Italy. From a young age he was drawn to sports, to competition, to the discipline of pushing his body further than most men dared. He became a police officer, a husband, a father. But above all, Mauro was an athlete, a former Olympic pentathlete, skilled in fencing, swimming, horse riding, running, and shooting. By his late 30s, Prosperi was no stranger to pain or endurance. He had faced long races, grueling events. But when he heard of the Marathon des Sables, the toughest foot race on Earth, something inside him stirred. It was a challenge unlike any he had known before. The Marathon des Sables, 6 days, 156 miles, each competitor carrying their own food, sleeping gear, and supplies. Temperatures soar to 120 degrees Fahrenheit by day, then plummet near freezing at night. There is no shade, no escape from the wind that cuts like a knife. Water is rationed carefully by race officials. To finish is a victory, to win is a legend. Every year, some collapse, some require evacuation, a few never return. Mauro Prosperi trained for months. He ran long distances carrying heavy packs, learning to survive on minimal water, pushing his body to adapt to heat. He studied the race carefully. He knew it would be brutal, but he believed he was ready. As he prepared to leave, his wife asked him if it was dangerous. Mauro smiled. He was a former Olympian. He was strong. What could possibly go wrong? April 1994. Hundreds of competitors from around the world gathered in Ouarzazate, Morocco, the gateway to the Sahara. Among them, Mauro Prosperi, 39 years old, lean, fit, ready to take on the unknown. They came for the challenge, for adventure, for the story they would tell their grandchildren. None imagined the nightmare that would unfold. On April 10th, the race began. The first stage, 21 miles across sand and stone. The runners set off as the sun climbed higher, each carrying at least 15 pounds of gear, each dreaming of finishing the toughest foot race on Earth. Mauro ran well. He was strong, determined, finishing each stage among the leaders. His confidence grew, but in the Sahara, confidence can be a dangerous thing. Day after day they ran. Mauro pushed through fatigue, through burning legs, through the endless dunes. At night, he lay under the stars, muscles aching, the desert wind whispering across the camp. He felt alive, exhausted, but alive. He believed the worst was behind him. But the desert was just getting started. On the 4th day, as Mauro ran across another endless stretch of dunes, the wind began to rise. At first it was just a breeze. Then the sky turned orange. The sun disappeared. The air filled with dust. A sandstorm was coming, and in the Sahara a sandstorm can swallow the world. April 14th, 1994. The 4th stage of the Marathon des Sables. Mauro Prosperi was running strong, somewhere near the front of the pack. Ahead stretched another field of towering dunes under the punishing sun, but behind him, the desert was about to awaken. At first, the wind just stung the skin. Then it became impossible to see. The sky turned the color of rust. The sun vanished. And in seconds, the world disappeared. In the Sahara, when the sandstorm comes, you either find shelter or you get swallowed whole. Mauro pulled his scarf tight, head bowed against the wind, trying to follow the trail, but the tracks vanished in seconds. The course markers disappeared. The storm didn't just erase the path, it erased the world. Hours passed. He stumbled on, convinced he was still heading the right way. He wasn't. By the time the storm cleared, Mauro was alone. When the sky finally cleared, there were no runners, no checkpoints, no markers. Just dunes in every direction. Mauro's heart sank. He shouted into the emptiness, but only the desert answered. That night, Mauro lit a small fire with what little he had, hoping the race officials would see the smoke. He rationed his remaining water. The desert turned cold, biting through his thin gear. He wrapped himself in his sleeping bag, staring up at the stars. Somewhere out there, he thought, the race was still going, but he was already in another world, one where the only race was to stay alive. The next morning, Mauro packed up and started walking. He decided to head east, hoping to cross paths with rescue teams or nomads. The desert stretched endlessly. The sun blazed overhead, his water was nearly gone. He rationed it carefully, a few sips an hour, but by midday his mouth was dry, his tongue swelling. He could feel his strength fading. By the second day alone, Mauro ran out of water completely. His lips cracked and bled, his urine turned dark from dehydration. He drank it to survive. He knew it was only buying him time. Without rescue, he would die. On the third day, Mauro spotted something on the horizon, a dark shape against the dunes. He staggered toward it, his body weak, vision swimming. For the first time since the storm, he found shelter, a roof over his head, shade from the killing sun. Inside the shrine, Mauro discovered bats nesting in the rafters. Weak and desperate, he caught them, cut their throats and drank their blood. It was food. It was liquid. It was life. He hated himself for it, but survival has no room for pride. Days passed. Mauro marked them in the sand. He was growing weaker, his body eating itself for energy. His vision blurred. The desert sun seemed to whisper to him, offering rest, offering surrender. But something in him refused to quit. He thought of his wife, his children. He promised himself he would see them again or die trying. By the fifth day alone, Mauro began to lose hope. He scrawled a farewell note to his wife in case his body was ever found. He believed death was near. He decided if rescue didn't come, he would take control of his fate. By the sixth day alone in the Sahara, Mauro Prosperi was a shell of the man who had begun the Marathon des Sables. He had lost nearly 20 pounds. His lips were cracked and bleeding. His urine was gone. There was nothing left to drink. His muscles trembled from weakness. Even his thoughts began to slow, like a candle burning low. He knew he was dying, and he didn't want his wife or his children to imagine him suffering, lost, alone. He wanted it to end. In his final act of hope, Mauro found a scrap of fabric from his gear. With a trembling hand, he wrote his wife's name and goodbye. He asked her forgiveness, told her he loved her, that he was sorry he wouldn't be coming home. Mauro looked at the rafters of the shrine. A wooden beam stretched across the ceiling. He tied a rope from his gear to it. He didn't want to starve. He didn't want to feel the sun slowly cook him alive. He wanted it over. But Mauro Prosperi wasn't ready to die. Not yet. He tried to hang himself, but his body was too weak to stay upright. The knot slipped. He fell to the ground, the rope tearing loose. Even in death, the desert would not take him easily. Mauro lay there for hours, drifting in and out of consciousness. He thought of his wife, his children, of the life waiting for him back in Italy. He prayed for strength, for rescue, for one more chance. On the seventh day, Mauro made a decision. If he was going to die, it would not be in that shrine. He would walk until he fell. Maybe someone would find him. Maybe not. But he would not give up. With no food, no water, and barely enough strength to stand, he began to walk. As the day wore on, Mauro began to hallucinate. The heat waves shimmered like water. He saw shapes on the horizon, palm trees, rivers, villages. Each time he reached them, there was nothing, just sand, always sand. On the ninth day, Mauro collapsed near a dune. His body was skeletal, his eyes were sunken, he was barely alive. They found him lying in the sand, half-conscious, barely able to speak. He had wandered 186 miles off course into Algeria. The nomads gave him water, dates, milk. Mauro drank slowly, his body shaking, too weak to even cry. They carried him to the nearest Algerian military post. From there, to a hospital. 9 days after he vanished, Mauro Prosperi was finally safe. April 21st, 1994. 9 days after he vanished into the Sahara Desert, Mauro Prosperi arrived at a hospital in Tindouf, Algeria. He was severely dehydrated, emaciated, sunburned, and barely clinging to life. He had lost 35 pounds. His liver was failing. His kidneys were close to shutting down. His body temperature had swung between searing heat and freezing nights, yet somehow he was still alive. The doctors could hardly believe it. 9 days in one of the most lethal environments on Earth, no food for nearly a week, almost no water. And yet, this man had walked into the hospital alive. They compared his ordeal to something out of legend, a survival story to rival any in history. Mauro drifted in and out of consciousness for hours. When he finally woke, the first thing he asked for was water. He spoke in a rasp, telling them about the storm, the shrine, the bats, the miles of empty sand. The doctors listened in silence, struggling to comprehend what he had endured. Back in Italy, news of Mauro's survival stunned the country. For days he had been presumed dead. His wife had already begun to mourn. Now she wept with relief. Against all odds, her husband was coming home. Within days, newspapers across Europe picked up the story. Lost marathon runner survives 9 days in Sahara. Headlines called him the desert miracle. Reporters wanted every detail. But for Mauro, it was too soon. He was still processing the nightmare he had lived through. Mauro spent weeks recovering. He needed IV fluids, treatment for liver damage, and care for severe sunburn and malnutrition. His muscles had wasted away. Walking was painful. Eating solid food was impossible at first. Doctors warned him it would be months before he regained his strength, but Mauro had already proven he was not like most men. Finally, Mauro returned to Italy. At the airport, reporters swarmed him, cameras flashed. He held his wife's hand tightly, shielding his eyes from the lights. Home at last, alive, against all odds. Mauro tried to return to normal life, but the desert never really left him. For years, he suffered from nightmares, flashes of heat and sand, the memory of drinking urine and bat blood just to stay alive. Survival had changed him forever. And yet, Mauro Prosperi did something no one expected. Years later, he returned to the Marathon des Sables, to the very race that had nearly killed him. This time, he finished the race. The Sahara had taken him to the edge of death. But Mauro refused to let it define him. He crossed the finish line with his head high, a survivor. It was more than a race, it was closure. After his return to Italy, Mauro Prosperi became a symbol of resilience, but survival came at a price. He had endured dehydration, starvation, and days of isolation in one of the harshest places on Earth. Yet what lingered most was not the physical pain, but the memories. Mauro often spoke of nightmares, visions of endless dunes, scorching winds, and the eerie silence of the Sahara nights. He dreamed of the shrine where he almost ended his life, the bats that gave him their blood, and the storm that changed everything. He said the desert never really left him, it lived on in his mind. In the years that followed, Mauro began to share his story publicly. Schools, sports organizations, survival training groups, all wanted to hear about the man who had defied death. He told them about determination, about hope when all seemed lost, about what it takes to survive when nature itself turns against you. His story inspired athletes, explorers, and ordinary people alike. Many said they learned from his resilience, his refusal to surrender, even when his body was breaking down. Mauro never claimed to be a hero. He always said he was just a man who didn't want to die. Years later, Mauro returned to the Sahara, not for a race, but to face the place where his life had nearly ended. He stood once more on the golden sands, staring out at the endless horizon, a man who had seen the edge of death and come back stronger. Surviving the Sahara changed Mauro Prosperi forever. He became a man who knew the value of water, of food, of every single breath. He appreciated the small things in life because he had nearly lost them all. He once said, "Life tastes different when you've been close to losing it." Today, Mauro Prosperi's story is told in documentaries, books, and survival manuals. Experts analyze his ordeal to teach future adventurers how to endure the impossible. His name lives on as the man who would not die in the Sahara. One interview shows Mauro standing at the edge of the dunes, watching the sun sink below the horizon. He said he felt peace there now, as if the desert had accepted him and he had accepted it. It was no longer the enemy, it was part of his story. Mauro Prosperi once said, "In the desert, you are nothing. The sun burns, the wind erases your steps, and the sand swallows your cries. You survive only if it allows you to." He survived 9 days alone in the Sahara Desert, but he never saw himself as a hero. Just lucky. Lucky to see his wife again. Lucky to feel rain on his face. Lucky to wake up each morning and drink a glass of water. Mauro's story teaches us something powerful about the fragility of life, about endurance, about refusing to give up even when the odds are impossible. In a world filled with chaos, his tale reminds us of the simplest truth: survival begins with hope. Years after his ordeal, Mauro returned to the Sahara one last time, this time not as a victim but as a man at peace. He stood there for a long time, watching the sun sink below the horizon, the wind whispering through the dunes. The desert had nearly taken his life, but it had also given him something back: perspective. Today, Mauro Prosperi's story is told around the world in books, documentaries, survival courses, and classrooms. He became a living reminder that the human spirit, when pushed to the edge, can endure the unthinkable. And for those who venture into the wild, his name is spoken with reverence. In the Sahara, nature does not care about heroes or headlines, only survival. Mauro Prosperi walked into the Sahara as a runner. He came out as a survivor. His story is not just about endurance, but about the will to live when death seems certain. And maybe that's what survival really is. Not just beating the odds, but learning to live again once the storm has passed. Thank you for watching this incredible story of survival. If Mauro Prosperi's journey moved you, subscribe and follow for more true stories of courage, endurance, and the unbreakable human spirit.